There is a place on the map where global shipping narrows to a single gap, just 2 miles wide. More than a shortcut, this is Bab el Mandeb, the Gate of Tears, and what happens here decides whether vital trade flows through the Red Sea or detours thousands of miles around Africa. If risk rises, the entire rhythm of world commerce can flip overnight. How can one strait hold this much power, and what really happens when ships have to choose their route? From the southern edge of the Arabian Peninsula to the Horn of Africa, a single maritime corridor stretches between continents. A tight map zoom reveals the narrow gap between Djibouti and Eritrea on one side and Yemen on the other. This narrow passage is the gate that can change whether ships use the Red Sea shortcut or detour around Africa. Ships sailing from Asia or the Persian Gulf trace a path through the Indian Ocean, then funnel into the Gulf of Aden. Here, the water narrows sharply between Yemen on one side and Djibouti and Eritrea on the other. This is the Bab el Mandeb Strait, where the open sea becomes a bottleneck before it opens again into the Red Sea. Every major vessel moving between Europe and Asia, whether carrying oil, gas, or thousands of containers, must pass through this corridor. The chain is unbroken: Indian Ocean, Gulf of Aden, Bab el Mandeb, Red Sea, Suez Canal, Mediterranean. There is no alternative shortcut. The Red Sea runs nearly 2,000 kilometers north to the Sinai, where it splits toward the Suez Canal and the Gulf of Aqaba. At the southern entrance, all traffic is squeezed through this single gate. The geography here is not just dramatic, it is decisive. Djibouti's port, just south of the strait, serves as a key hub for Ethiopia and the surrounding region, underlining how local economies depend on this maritime artery. Countries along the route include Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. They are all stakeholders in keeping the corridor open. For global trade, Bab el Mandeb is more than a name on the map. It is the linchpin that holds together the fastest sea route between Europe and Asia. One narrow passage, flanked by rocky coasts and watched by nations, forms the critical link in a chain that stretches across half the world. A choke point is more than just a narrow spot on a map. It is a funnel where the world's shipping traffic is squeezed into a tight corridor, forcing even the largest vessels to follow the same lanes. At Bab el Mandeb, the effect is immediate. Hundreds of ships, from oil tankers to container giants, converge on a passage that at its slimmest is just a few kilometers wide. This concentration means that any change, whether a rise in risk, a spike in cost, or a new restriction, affects every ship in line. The logic is simple but powerful. When a choke point becomes risky or expensive, the cost is not just local. Instead, it ripples through global supply chains, raising prices, delaying deliveries, and sometimes forcing entire fleets to find new routes. Other famous choke points work the same way. The Strait of Hormuz, for example, handles a huge share of the world's oil exports. The Strait of Malacca, near Singapore, is a lifeline for goods moving between the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. Each of these funnels is a single point where small changes have outsized effects. When the risk at one of these points rises, whether from conflict, piracy, or weather, shipping companies and insurers recalculate instantly. The margin for error disappears, and the decision to detour, reroute, or wait can flip overnight. In global shipping, the narrowest points often carry the heaviest weight. On any given day, the decision to send a ship through Bab el Mandeb rests on a handful of signals, some public and some buried in insurance contracts. The process often starts with a morning update in a liner control room, where an operations manager scans the latest advisories from maritime security centers and government agencies. If the Joint War Committee in London declares the Red Sea, or Bab el Mandeb, a listed war risk area, the calculation changes immediately. For every vessel entering a listed zone means the company's insurance broker must secure a voyage-specific war risk premium, sometimes amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars per trip. This is not a flat rate. It is quoted as a percentage of the vessel's insured value and can rise or fall in response to attacks, naval warnings, or political statements. Insurance costs can shift routing choices as fast as advisories do. Insurance is only one layer. Company safety policies may require board-level approval for any transit through a high-risk area. Some operators mandate additional security measures, such as sailing in convoys, hiring armed guards, or adjusting speed and routing. Crew safety is a core concern. Under international labor rules and union guidelines, seafarers have the right to refuse assignments they consider unacceptably dangerous. In practice, this means that even if a route is technically open, a captain or crew can halt a voyage if the perceived threat is too high. In late 2023, several major lines publicly suspended Red Sea transits, citing both crew welfare and insurance terms as decisive factors. The operations manager weighs these inputs: the latest risk advisories, the cost of war risk insurance, the availability of naval escorts, and the company's own protocols. If the combined risk and cost of Bab el Mandeb outweigh the savings of the Suez shortcut, the plan shifts. The broker's email confirming a new premium, the captain's report on crew sentiment, and the daily advisory from UK maritime trade operations all feed into a single decision: proceed through the strait, wait for better conditions, or reroute around the Cape of Good Hope. Each input is a trigger, and when enough of them turn red, the shortcut closes for that ship, sometimes for the entire fleet. When the Bab el Mandeb Strait becomes too risky or too costly to use, there is one practical alternative for ships moving between Europe and Asia. They take the long detour around the Cape of Good Hope. That route, tracing the southern tip of Africa, is not just a longer line on a map, it changes the global rhythm of shipping. Think of Bab el Mandeb as the gate that can flip a shortcut into a marathon. Instead of threading the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, vessels continue south through the Indian Ocean, round the Cape, and then head north in the Atlantic toward Europe's ports. The difference is stark. Depending on the ship's starting point and destination, this detour can add more than a week of sailing time, with extra days at sea translating directly into higher fuel bills, increased crew costs, and more wear on the vessel. Extra time at sea becomes extra cost. For a fleet manager, the impact is immediate. Each round trip takes longer, which means fewer voyages per year for every ship. When dozens or hundreds of ships are forced onto the Cape route, the world's available shipping capacity tightens. Schedules stretch, and the supply of ships in the market effectively shrinks, even though the number of vessels has not changed. This is not just theoretical. When the Suez Canal was closed from 1967 to 1975, nearly all long-haul trade between Europe and Asia shifted to the Cape, turning a shortcut into a marathon. The same pattern repeated during recent Red Sea crises, when major container lines and oil carriers suspended Suez transits and redirected their fleets. The result is pressure on global capacity. The Cape route is reliable but unforgiving. Weather in the southern oceans can be rough, and the extra distance means more time exposed to storms and unpredictable currents. Operators must plan for longer stretches between bunkering ports and adjust their rotations to meet customer contracts. The cost-benefit calculation is clear. Every added day ties up ships and cargo, and that ripples through charter rates, delivery windows, and the availability of empty containers. While the Cape of Good Hope keeps trade moving when the Red Sea is blocked, it comes at a price paid in time, fuel, and global logistics efficiency. When ships are forced onto the Cape route, the impact lands hard at the world's busiest container ports. Instead of vessels arriving in steady, predictable flows, schedules stretch and bunching takes over. Suddenly, several large ships may dock within hours of each other, overwhelming berths and pushing cranes and yard space to their limits. A port operations manager describes terminal teams scrambling to clear containers as storage yards fill up and truck queues back onto city roads. This sudden congestion cascades through the system. Yard managers track the overflow, watching reefer plugs and storage space run short. While the Red Sea corridor sees a drop in throughput, ports farther north brace for surges that strain every link in the chain. Longer routes change arrival timing and create bunching at terminals, pushing cranes, container yards, and truck and rail windows beyond their planned capacity. The result is uneven work for ports, carriers, and inland logistics providers. Early signs of renewed confidence at Bab el Mandeb appear in the data long before headlines change. Maritime analysts track automatic identification system signals, known as AIS, from ships transiting the strait, watching for a steady uptick after a period of decline. Insurance brokers note the first drops in war risk premiums, as underwriters downgrade the area from extreme to high risk. Carrier bulletins begin to announce restored rotations through the Red Sea, and major alliances publish schedules that once again include Suez. Each of these signals, a rise in vessel counts, a cheaper premium, and a new service update, offers a real-time measure of risk easing that is visible to anyone following the numbers. Today, a single strait still shapes the flow of global trade. As each risk recalculates routes, the world's supply chains remain only as stable as their narrowest passage. The future of commerce passes through this gate, reminding us that small places can decide enormous outcomes. Thanks for watching.